Well, thank you everybody for coming. In fact, I can only see about 6 people. I don't know if more of you are on video, but it'd be great to be able to see you as well as hear from you. Um, we want to make this really interactive, as Bonnie said. Um, to introduce myself, I'm Sue Bingham. I've been passionate about making a great place to work for a decade, and I work with a small group of zealots who have been believing that what we're experiencing some of now, we could have been experiencing by choice quite some time ago. So anyway, that prompted me to do the poll, Don't Go Back. And we're going to look back at that poll and take it again with the current people and have an opportunity to talk about what's getting in the way. Before we go there, I wanted to have Mark Samuel introduce himself. Mark is, well, he's my very dear friend. He's also a guru, I believe, in the areas of accountability and in transformation, organizational transformation, and so on. Mark, do you want to just say a word?
Well, thank you, Sue, and we are part of the Mutual Admiration Society because I absolutely love Sue and love the work that HPWP does around culture. As anyone who knows me, I'm not a real big fan of most organizations that do quote unquote culture change, but I've actually seen major transformation come from Sue's methodology and work that she does in organizations. I've been witness to it, and it's just absolutely fabulous. And it's just such a great opportunity for me to be able to actually do this with you and work with you on this particular webinar on re-entry, which to me is so important right now. In terms of us, impact and our whole B-state approach. We've got a team here in the US and Canada. We've got a team in the Netherlands, which some people are representing on this call, and another group in Bogota, Colombia. And we're all about creating breakthrough business and culture transformation. For us, the two are linked. And when an organization is going through the need for a urgent business transformation, that's usually when we get called. So that's kind of the body of our work. And I'm just looking forward to learning from everybody on the call. And I don't know if you can see this, Sue. I'm going to just share something with you. If you go between the PowerPoint and the people's pictures, there's a kind of a double line. You can actually stretch that towards the PowerPoint to see everybody at one time.
Really?
Yeah, it's really magic.
I need so much work, so much help.
Did it work?
No, actually, I just see you now, but let's just go on. Oh, now I see more people. Okay, thank you. Okay. So let's, what we'd like to do is talk a little bit about our objectives, which we've mentioned. Ideally, this is to listen to you. You can read a lot of stuff on the internet and you can hear what's going on, and there's lots of research being done, but we want to talk to real people with real experience, and we want you to share and promote any of the positive experiences you're having on this return to work, as many companies are returning to work and the states are opening up. We also want to be a friend to those of you who are concerned, because I think we do have some reason to be concerned, and we want to work with Mark and his group and our group to talk about what are the things we can do if we do have those concerns. How can we help a reentry into the workplace that looks different today than it did pre-pandemic? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the poll. So we're going to do this poll. We've experienced a few technical difficulties with the poll. Hopefully you can see it and read it. I'm just going to make sure everyone can see it by reading. When businesses get the green light, which most have, to reopen their work site, how will your company respond? And it's not a multiple choice. It's simply, will they be more open to flexible and remote work schedules, or will they be more comfortable returning to remote workers to their work sites? If you would vote, please, then we'll take a look at the results.
And if you're a consultant, you can speak for some of the clients that you have. Like, where's the greatest number of clients falling in these two choices?
Great.
Just got a couple people more to weigh in, and we'll close the poll.
Your vote matters.
More than ever.
Wow.
Okay. This is really good. That's
great.
I think what's really helping this too is that our business leaders are now looking at the cost of maintaining all these facilities and all the things that go with supporting them. And so there's a financial driver that's also causing people to be more open as well. But 100%. Thank you very much for that. Let's take a look at the second question.
Can I ask a question of the group and just see if how people might respond? Do you think that's because organizations are forced, in a sense, to have more openness, or do you think it's truly their choice? Like, I know some organizations aren't yet able to go back to work completely. So I'm curious, just, because we have international people and we have people in different states, I'm just kind of curious if it's, I don't know how you guys want to do the responding, whether chat or lift someone's mic up for a second, but I'm just kind of curious.
You can raise your hand if you're on video, or you can raise your hand on the participants box where it's got a little opportunity to raise a hand. Anybody?
I don't see any hands being raised.
Evelyn.
It indicated that he has someone who would love to go back to the way it was, but slightly more on the more open side.
Who is that?
David Rogers.
David. Okay, great. And Evelyn raised her hand. If you can unmute Evelyn.
Mine too.
My situation's a little different from a lot of the others. I own my own company, so it's just me. So I've been looking at ways to redo things, but from the perspective of my husband's company, he was never allowed to do remote working. And his company, it was basically forced, or they wouldn't be existing today. So I think the being forced to do it has shown a lot of companies that it is possible. And as Sue said, they're now looking at what would it cost to reconfigure office spaces to make them accommodating to the new future, and what it would be to just let people stay at home and continue working.
Yeah, thank you, Evelyn. That's my experience has been, a lack of desire to have people work remotely up until the virus. But I think it's for a number of reasons, there is more of an openness to it. Thank you. Well, let's take a look at the second poll question. When most organizations do reopen their work sites, yet employees asked to continue to work remotely, which of the following do you predict will happen? Choose one or the other. Many managers will be uncertain as to how to respond, so at some point new policies will be created to structure how to manage remote work. Or managers will be encouraged to work with their teams to define the most productive way of accomplishing results for that team and for the company. which do you think is likely to happen or is happening? Please vote.
Wow.
Everybody voted?
Just a couple more coming in here. We'll close it in just a few more seconds.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. Well, it's close. It's closer than I thought it would be.
Wow.
That many managers will be uncertain. In the large companies is where my biggest concern is because of the, I don't know, the overall the command and control structure which currently exists in a lot of companies. Can I ask, for those of you that said the second answer, that they'll be encouraged to work with their teams to define the most productive way, if you've got an experience with that, with a client or within your own company, would somebody be willing to share that? Anybody raise a hand? Ah, Frank. Let's take Frank off of mute, Bonnie.
Thank
Frank.
you very much. Hello, everybody.
Hey,
Hello.
Frank.
It's 8 o'clock at the evening. Thank you for welcoming me, Mark. But let's answer the question. I was doubting because yesterday I was able for the first time to visit 4 customers, finally, and not remote, but to be there. And I asked this question, and you see some of them are very uncertain. What's happening? What do I have to do? And that uncertainty also encouraged them to do more. And the thing I found out, that's why I choose 2, these managers were forced to visit their employees at home.
Oh.
And they had a
Interesting.
total new relationship. They never visited their employees at home.
Wow.
So they saw things and they see people working very hard, and they were amazed. And what they did, some managers,
Wow.
not so much people manager I know in the automotive, they had to bring flowers or torch or a little present. They were forced to, but they got warm reactions. So they had a totally different relationship with people at home, sometimes in their shorts or whatever happened. And now they think they really said, I have to find a way to help my people even more. They will be more at home, that we will choose that. And how can I really help them? And they were never in that idea of helping their people. They were more telling them what to do. And I'm now talking about the automotive, which I'm very related to. And they have that pattern. So that was a kind of insight for me.
Oh, Frank.
That's a huge insight.
That's huge. That's
Huge.
huge. That is wonderful. I mean, that'd be a great question to find out how many companies have actually had their managers. I even wondered if managers are keeping in touch on a regular basis with their remote workers, or if they're just sending an email here and there and, you know, checking up on them, or worse yet, buying software to track their productivity. I'll get off my rant there for a minute. Thank you, Frank. Anybody have concerns? No, not that I can see. Well, let's get into the third poll question. Please answer as it applies to your company's past approach. When at all possible, remote work is advantageous to companies and employees. That's what they believe. Or your past company's approach has been that remote work is a privilege and should be earned. Please vote.
This is going to be a great discussion. I hope. We'll give just, I think, a couple more folks here and we'll end the poll.
Whoa. Whoa.
I told you, Mark.
Oh my God.
Mark didn't believe me.
I didn't. So I would love to know from those of you who wrote the remote work is a privilege and should be earned, I'd like to understand how someone in your organization would actually earn it. Like, what would be expected? And I'll take anyone's, I'd love to make this a conversation.
You know what? We could take everybody off of mute because we have a smaller group than it signed up.
Sure, I could do that. And quickly, Annie has a question. She wanted to ask if it was before the pandemic or after that last question. So I'll take everybody off mute. We can, all can.
Well, I was answering it from previously based on my clients, essentially. And I think they reserve that a lot, not all of them, but a number of them reserve that for people they felt were, you asked, how would they do it? That they felt that were trusted, that consistently performed, that they really felt were going to do more work by doing that than showing up.
Yeah.
And they made it a very small group, and it was very personal.
That's been my experience too. Annie, I think the focus was on the company's past approach.
But I am curious, now that people have had the experience, do you think people still have to earn it? Has that mindset changed, or is it still there in some organizations?
One of my CEOs, for instance, as a post this, said it this way exactly. He said, I think we've discovered we have a performance organization, a performance-oriented organization, which means he didn't really know until this happened how hard people really worked.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I also think the way I've seen it before is that if it was in the company's interest for someone to work from home due to illness, I know Sue from the UK noted that if there was illness or if there was some other reason for that's what was gonna, that was what the driver was. So it was, if it was in the company's best interest, but if it was the employee that wanted to do it, unless they were a high performance employee and there was some really good rationale, it typically was not encouraged. I'm hoping it's changed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all the data is saying that people are experiencing more of that.
Well, another interesting aspect that's just a little difference is I think this particular group is a little bit worried about some of their high performers working at home, not because they're going to perform less, but the ones that are single parents with young kids literally have to take care of their kids. So they're worried about their health and everything else, but that'll disappear as the child care and schooling starts to come back, but they don't know when. So they're losing some of their better performers to taking care of family.
And there has been some raising of the issue that some people are actually working harder at home than they did in the workplace. You know, longer hours, you know, because it's not as structured, then it's bleeding into weekends and, you know, just people are actually putting in more time. And I do know of one organization that because of that, they actually gave Fridays off twice a month to all their employees because they knew that they were getting so much out of them working at home and not being constrained by the work schedule. And they didn't want people to burn out, so they did the Fridays off.
Good. Well,
Interesting sensitivity,
That's nice.
wouldn't you say, Sue?
yeah, and the really, the COVID is horrible, but the really good thing that's come out of it is the forcing of change, the absolute forcing of change, and then people coming to a new set of beliefs about people. You know, we've always believed that 95% of your people are good people and they want to work hard and they want your company to be successful and all those things. And there's just these 5% or the bad apples. And I think that some of the negative assumptions about people in general are now being removed and changed as a result of this experience. It's really good.
Well, and Sue, you're bringing up something important, and at least for the people that are on this call that know me but don't know you, I'd like you to just share just briefly on how that has shaped how you consult for HR, because you were the first one that ever woke me up to the idea that HR set up policies for the 5%, not the 95%.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, what I'd encourage everybody to do, if you can, and you're dealing with your clients, is take a look at whatever the employee handbook or policy manual says. I urge people that are out looking for a job, that are interviewing the company as well, to ask to see that, because that will tell you a lot about whether or not the value system is words and the belief in people is positive, or if we may think people in general are pretty good, but we've structured all of our policies and practices to try to catch the 5%. And what's fun about that is that the 5% is, I think we got Bob. Hey, Bob. Bonnie, can you mute Bob?
Yes, I will.
Thanks. So I think what it says is that, first of all, it's changing assumptions about people. Second of all, when you've got those policies for the 5%ers, the bad apples, that's a roadmap. I mean, they love that. That's, let me see what else I can do wrong. And they can work their way around all the things that we've put in place to try to catch them. But meanwhile, it's pretty insulting to the 95%.
Yeah.
All that as it is still wouldn't be so bad if in HR we weren't constantly told by our legal profession that we had to treat everybody the same. And we can't treat people the same, because no person and no circumstance is exactly the same. We need to use good judgment. That's part of being a good leader. So most companies, out of fear of legal adjudication, have erred by saying, well, we've got to treat everybody the same. And we know that that's not true, because if you treat people well, they'll respond in kind.
Yeah, excellent, excellent.
Mm.
And just as an added note, if you're basing your company on the 5%, then you're also in what I refer to as a fear-based or lack mentality. And once you get that kind of mentality going, it breeds silos, it breeds blame game, it breeds a lack of inclusion. There's so many other factors. It's not just, quote unquote, to me, the HR policies that you're talking about, Sue, but those HR policies and that mentality around people ends up creating, and Frank put it in here really well in the chat, you know, it's all about control, and that seeps through everything that results in blame game and lack of inclusion. So it's, to me, it's a real important issue that you're bringing up.
Yeah, thank you everyone for that, and thanks, Mark. I'm trying to not get on my band wagon here.
I love your bandwagon.
Okay, you're sweet. How about the fourth poll, Glo?
A comment in the chat, and it states and new ideas about the frequency of meetings, and that was from Frank. So maybe you can share a little bit about that, Frank.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't see that. Yeah, and it's the point of trust and control. What I saw is when one of my customers is really purpose driven, you get total other reactions as when the desired outcome is only money or efficiency. And what I saw is when they found out that remote control is really doing more work than before the pandemic, they love remote working. But the same was with meetings. They found out that so many meetings are ineffective and people don't have so many meetings anymore. So at home, they work so much more. So one of the guys said, let's skip all the meetings. He said, and before that, he was not open for any change in their meetings. But now they found out the hard way or the soft way. And I see a big difference between those companies who are really into efficiency and cost lowering, and people are really a human resource and fit into the metrics, instead of that they're really trying to change the world a little bit around them. And so I love that difference in how they look at. And that's the control team. And that's how I connect that to the fear-based.
Yes, control and fear. Thank you.
And Sue Askew also had a comment in the chat that she's part of an HR interims WhatsApp group who are asking for all kinds of advice on how to write new policies for the new world of work. It seems they went for the changes to respond to COVID and are now trying to write policy retrospectively to ensure they are covered moving forward. Did you want to add a little bit more about that, Sue?
Unmute, Sue.
Sure, yeah. It's interesting that it seems like a bit of a panicked move. It's like, oh, now we've done these things. We've got issues with all the health and safety. We've got issues with mental health. We've got issues with how we manage performance. And it's quite varied. And some of it, I guess, is well meant. But really, they are looking at, we've got to write some policies now. We kind of went into panic mode. And now we better get our ducks in a row and get this all written down in case something happens. So that's the sense that I got from a lot of requesters. Has anyone written a policy on this? Has anyone written a policy on this? And trying to share it out.
Yes.
It's a shame. Mm.
Yeah,
It is. It is. One of the things Annie wrote in the chat box too is that there's a sense of people feeling a little more free to disagree. When I worked in a big company, if I didn't think a meeting had value for me, I just didn't go to it. But I realized that in a lot of companies where there's a fair amount of fear, you go unquestioningly. You don't get to exercise your choice about, is this going to be value added and is it going to help? So I think Annie's point about presenteeism and being feeling more free to express what we feel is another positive outcome.
absolutely.
Okay, how about number 4? If a remote worker is not performing as expected, what do you predict would be your manager's first response or your management's first response within the company? Would they have a virtual meeting? Replace Zoom with virtual. Would they have a virtual meeting to probe for the causes of decreased performance? Or would they ask the remote worker to return to the office environment until performance has been improved? Please vote. I'm going to vote the way my clients told me they thought would happen.
Half the group has voted, a couple more responses and we'll close the poll.
Well, good. I mean, wow. I see that as really good news.
That's really good.
That is good news. That they would inquire, they would meet. Hopefully, it's virtual, it's face to face. I'm one of the 30% because I talked to a couple companies with some senior level leaders who believe in HPWP, what we do, who believe in the 95%, who are very focused on that. But when I asked them, even though they're very much a culture of believing in trust and respect and positive assumptions, they felt that that still would be a knee-jerk reaction to someone not performing. So it was meant not so much as it was a thoughtful response as they thought it might be a knee-jerk reaction just to comfort with the past.
Do you see the connection, Sue, between that and the answer to the question about working from home as a privilege and has to be earned?
Yeah, I think those two are connected, and so it's that we call it traditional mindset, or versus the more agile mindset that's needed for future growth.
And Evelyn commented that option 2 could be seen as punishment. Evelyn, did you want to talk a little bit more about that?
I think if, the first thing that you have to look at, and Sue, I still look back to you on this because I have attended quite a few HPWP meetings in the past, is your first reaction may be, well, bring the person back in and see what the problem is, instead of, but the employee may see it as, well, they don't like my work, so they're making me come in to prove what I'm doing. So yeah. I would hope the first reaction would always be at least a phone call saying, why has your productivity diminished? Why has the quality diminished? Asking if there's a particular reason, because it could be something as simple as a misunderstanding of the directions.
You are so right. And I think you raised a really good point about how it's can be viewed by the employee, even if that's not the intent of the management. That's a really good point.
I'd like to propose another thought on this one. I like to propose the thought or the possibility that that when the person was back in the work environment and there was a challenge or a problem, those same managers still didn't address it by asking questions or seeking to understand. I think they would just go into more of a control mentality or a punishment mentality to address it. And so if they couldn't ask the questions at work when the person was working in the work environment, what's going to enable that same manager to think more critically, to ask questions about the human conditions if the person's working remotely? And so for me, this is actually the opportunity to actually develop better leadership so that you don't have the option to bring them back to work. You actually have to find out what's wrong, what's going on, have meaningful conversations, and actually do what a leader ought to be doing, which is helping to remove obstacles and barriers for their people being as effective as possible.
Yes,
but I think it's the same habit.
It is, and it's the same mindset. And again, another HR policy that is rampant and it still exists everywhere is the progressive discipline policy, which doesn't really allow for finding out what's the cause of the issue. It's typically a one-way conversation that says, this is your first warning and you need to correct this, or there'll be further punishment or consequences. And then it's a staged approach. And again, the 5%ers know how to work their way all around that. But it's not problem solving in nature. It's again, treating everybody with the same roadmap for a performance issue, which is one that's geared toward punishment, not geared toward solving the issue.
I think David has something to add as well, right, David?
Oh, I think I was just along Mark's line just as he was saying it, but to me, I probably answered based on where they are right now, because they'll want to get to the person who's there if they're active like that. And so they would probably use the phone or Zoom if they're already there, versus predicting what would happen after people moved into the workplace. So that's just how I answered it. But I was kind of a little bit along the lines of Mark. If they weren't good at addressing this before people split up, how much better are they going to be in either situation? You know, that type of thing. Frank also I saw Frank put something down that was interesting too.
Yeah, that people are better listeners.
I was triggered by the habit point of Mark. And what I found out in the Zoom meetings I joined, and the Google meetings and the team meetings, whatever there is, that some of the managers I coach now really had to listen because of the technique. I don't know if you found that out by yourselves. And normally they will take over because they don't listen. And now it's one by one, it's slower, but it's about the issue. So they really listen before they answered, which I always ask them to do, but now they have to. And that changes their mind, but also their behavior. So it changed the habit of communication. And I see that as a positive point to
Yes.
try to learn them that so they are conscious, competent in that.
This roundtable for me is a boost. It's a real plus hearing about the many things that can work and are working and change. And even if it's not rampant yet, you can see the seeds are happening. I'm really excited. This has been very helpful to me. Sometimes I get into a negative assumption mindset about companies, and that's not helpful. And so I love hearing about the positive observations and things that are happening, and I think that's what we need to focus on. And then Mark, you've really helped companies transform, and your business focus is so acute and so laser focused. If you could, would you just share a couple of your observations with this group, some tips?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for inviting me to do that, Sue. And I don't think, is there a way for me to work the PowerPoint, or probably not? So I can, because I have it animated. So there's just a click that, I don't know if you have a signal for click, 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 click.
Bonnie, can you click or share?
Just forward the slide, Bonnie.
Are you co-host, Mark?
There you go. One more.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to be going through this pretty fast, but you know, there's really a choice point of whether we stay in a mindset of A, where we've been up to this point, a current state, and just modifying it. So if you do 2 clicks, Bonnie, you'll see, do we just improve based on this coronavirus situation, or do we actually truly rethink our businesses, rethink our cultures, rethink our HR policies, which if you click 3 more times, really take us to a future state of B, and click 1 more time, which is actually something different, where we're not stuck in the box or the paradigm we were in before. We're actually going to move to a new paradigm. We call it a breakthrough state. That's why we call it moving from A to B. But it's really a mindset of wanting to do that, as opposed to how do we hold on to as much as possible and just improve what we're going to improve. Very different way to look at it. And it's a real, to me, this whole coronavirus situation, the pandemic, has allowed us to get unstuck in some ways for the first time in decades in the way we think. We can use that opportunity to really create a brand new normal that, you know, or a next normal at least, that could be truly different. And to me, there are 3 traps to this. And if you just click the next slide, I'll do, to me, the 3 traps our one-size-fits-all mentality. I mean, we've got to get out of the mindset to treat everybody the same. As Sue was talking about this, you said it so well. We're all different. We're even seeing that difference between people who did well in remote and people who really needed to get back to the workplace just to get a break or to have some social interaction. There's differences between extroverts, introverts, but there's also differences for organizations that have multiple locations, that even those multiple locations may need to re-enter differently. Like I've got a company that has a division in Florida, Puerto Rico, Seattle, and Alaska. You can't treat all of those the same. The states are different, the cultures are different, and the regulatory standards for each are different. So trying to say, oh, we're going to do this in a unified way is kind of ridiculous. The second thing that I was shocked by, quite honestly, is that in many of the teams, leadership teams that I have worked with, the topic of reentry became political. Excuse me, but it was, some people were advocating wearing masks and coming back with social distancing and cleansing. Other people were saying, no, we don't need to do any of that. Let's just bring people back to work, and we don't need to care about masks because there's no science in that or whatever. And they're literally talking politically rather than looking at what's the data for their organization, what are the circumstances for their organization. And even the question is, safety really number one for your people? Because we always talk about safety being such an important core value. Are we really treating it that way? And then finally, the cost of reentry. Like, what are the costs? What are the costs if you bring people back too soon and they get sick and have to leave again? Much greater than people just working remotely. Because if I'm sick, I'm not going to be able to work. So what does that cost? What's the cost of confusion to not have it clear what your guidelines are for coming back? And do you phase that? Do you make it, you know, do you do it in increments over time? What are the costs in terms of efficiency and effectiveness that have been gained from working remotely? So to me, there's a lot of consideration for all of these. And that's why in the next slide, we really look at that learning is the key to reentry. Like, bottom line, we've got to be in a mindset of learning. What worked and didn't work about executing remotely, whether it's meetings, customer service, addressing problems. And the next bullet, it's how did leadership, individual roles, and teamwork change and improve? Are there new habits to reinforce based on that information? How did communication and connection improve? Like, to me, one of the big things that happened in the coronavirus environment is it's less now about communicating information and more about how are we making human connection? Like, how are we truly connecting with individuals rather than just communicating with them as if they're objects? And how do we care for people in a virtual environment in ways that we never cared for them? And I wrote that wrong, but cared for them, you know, before. So it's like, to me, the level of caring is now increased, where we can treat people individually. That goes back to that performance problem you were talking about, Sue. It's like, do you just bring them back to the work environment, or do you ask questions, call them on the phone? That's true caring. And then if you go to the next bullet, it's how will we ensure alignment of leadership? Because the last thing we want now is confusion, especially coming back, you know, in how we come back and how we stay partially virtual, partially back at work. Leadership has to be aligned on that. And that doesn't mean that every leader is doing it the same. It means we all have alignment in how we're doing it, even in the different approaches we take. So for me, those become important. Then what did we learn about our employees? We've talked a lot about on here. What did we learn about their accountability? I mean, that was the biggest breakdown. If you know, we're in the accountability space. You never want someone to work at home because you can't hold them accountable. Well, you didn't need to. People just showed up and did so much better. do we view people's keeping commitment, even their adaptability? It's amazing to see how adaptable people have been, both to having to work, having to sometimes school their kids, homeschool their children, or work with their partners, who are also working, and how they had to trade off and do those kinds of creative solutions, how they address challenges. I mean, it's been phenomenal to see what people have been able to do. So I think we can't ignore the learning in the rush to come back to reentry.
Yeah, one of the things that you said in your series, and if you haven't seen that, Mark has a series on LinkedIn that's a roadmap to reentry. It's got 4 pieces to it, and a lot of it has to do with going back and asking questions.
Yeah.
And talking about what you've learned, and then turning that learning into action and into a new model, into a new B state. I always learn when I hear you talk, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Sue.
So what we wanted to do to wrap it up is just do actually a round table of each one of you. Tell us what had value for this in using this roundtable, because this is the first time we've done it, and how do we continue the conversation or broaden the conversation? What else can we and should we do to keep our organizations focused on the learning and on the B state? And can we start with Evelyn? Can we start with you?
Really trying to decide, obviously, the positivity, going back and with what I do, I sell advertising for a weekly paper, going back and just showing the encouragement. We are getting back to what we're doing. Yes, things are a little different, but we are coming back. Things will go back to a new normal, and just going forward, that we all have to work to get it back to that new normal.
Yeah, and that it can be a good thing.
Yes.
Frank?
Yeah, I thank the universe for this period, and not because of all the people we lost and all the illness, which was terrible, but I learned so much from the people who are learning, and especially now, this is what I just wrote it down. This is the first worldwide external driver we all have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that it connects so much. This is what I learned from you people now. This is what we all have to deal with in every country, every company. And what I expected, positive as I am, that whole Europe would work together also politically, and all the world would work together, and Trump would change. And that's not happening as fast as I would think.
Oh, Frank.
I was a little bit hoping for that, but I do see some big changes, because this will happen again. How do we connect? How do we prepare? How can we be proactive? And so I love that. So I think there should be more conversations. What I learned that from Mark the first time he wrote something down on LinkedIn about pandemic was, I told all my customers and my friends to observe. Take some time to observe, and then to learn. And write down what you observe and share that with me. And oh, I learned so much about that. So thank you for that, Mark.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing very much, Frank. Alan.
Hello, everyone. One of the great takeaways is how the mindset has changed, and how the coronavirus situation shifted some paradigms and some assumptions, to the point that it changed behavior in how we interact and expect to work with colleagues and friends. I found it curious how Mark expressed A+ versus the B, and it's definitely a B state where we've changed, the assumptions have moved. I think someone mentioned of a CEO expressing, wow, who would have known that people could be so productive working remotely? So something fundamentally has changed, and I think that we're moving in the right direction to the 95%.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan.
Hey, Jane.
Hey guys.
Oh, so good to hear your voice.
I actually was on a hike this morning, so I look bedraggled, but whatever. Here I am, bedraggled.
Well, I've seen you with your hair stuck in rollers, so in a brush. So
Flat from a baseball cap. So no, this was just great to hear different perspectives, and that there's a lot of hope. You know, is kind of the big takeaway that I'm having from this call, that there's so much opportunity to do things really different in absolutely every realm. And on my hike, we were talking about, like, we just need a whole new economy. Like, we really don't need that many more t-shirts, you know, and that many more doodads, but we need more teachers, and we need more healthcare workers, and we need to take care of our forests. So I'm just hoping that we really use this opportunity to pivot.
yeah,
And to treat our workers way better, you know, and that they are trustworthy. And then if they're not, you talk about it and you see what's going on, and are they the right fit for that organization, or should they be doing something else?
yes. Thank you, Jane.
Thanks. Good to see all of you.
Yeah. Hugo, are you there? Hugo, you're muted.
I've selected for him to unmute.
Okay.
I'll do it again.
Okay. We may not hear from Hugo. Hey, Bob. Are you there?
I am, Sue. How are you?
I'm good. How come we're not seeing you?
Well, I told Bonnie I had somebody show up for an appointment that was supposed to be here this morning, and so I've been a little bit distracted, and I apologize.
No problem.
What's that?
So, well, no problem. So what had value for you?
I don't know. The biggest thing that always has value for me in something like this is getting perspectives that I haven't heard before. Somebody's always got a different or another angle on something that I hadn't thought about, hadn't seen, and I think it just a roundtable or a discussion like this just opens my eyes to even little things that I hadn't thought about when it comes to, especially in this case, remote work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have exactly the same. Mine's sort of a combination of hope and new things I hadn't thought about. David. Let's unmute David.
I think for me, it's the awarenesses like Frank was saying, that just from the change, people are doing better things. You know, they're listening, they're slowing down, they're stopping excessive meetings. I know, so, and they're trying things that probably in their mind, because they were forced to, they might never do, you know. I know we were forced to take something that we are convinced is better done in person and figured out we could do it better virtually. I don't know if we ever would have made that change, you know, if we hadn't done it, and get excited about it at the same time rather than resist it. So to me, those are the things. I think that's very, very encouraging.
Yeah, yes. Excellent. Thank you, David. Annie?
Thank you. I'm so energized. The value of this call is learning from each of you. I am just energized by what each person is sharing. I love the comment David just made about taking risks. I think all of us have been in that mode of reflecting and changing things that need to be different. I recently read a study from an organization that measures values, and they're saying that a transformation that normally would have taken 5 to 7 years occurred because of the COVID pandemic in just 6 weeks. So my hope is that that continues after the COVID pandemic is over.
Absolutely. Thank you. Sue?
Yeah, I'm off mute. I am. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Super. So I was just scribbling some notes because there's so many things I wanted to say, but I really loved what Frank said about the connection between different parts of the world. I think that global connectivity is incredible. So it's been great to hear that today. But also what David was saying about great things happening. And I think that's a really important shift. I feel that's a really positive state to be in. I have had in the last couple of days conversations with clients who are approaching reopening their business and looking at government funding stopping. This may be UK centric, but I think it's going to be everywhere. Their government funding is going to wrap up in the next couple of months, and they are looking at mass retrenchment. And I think what would be really cool for a roundtable was like, how do we support the next phase? Because we've gone through this change in the world of work, but we're going to be hit with a real retrenchment for a lot of organizations. And I'm sure there's positive things in what Jane was saying about pivot. People are going to have to pivot their careers and go, right, what now? What next? But I think a roundtable with that, how do we get geared up to deal with mass retrenchment? Because people are going to, yeah, that would be great. How supportive could we be if we had some ideas as a group for that? So that would be my.
That's a great, that's a wonderful suggestion. You always have great suggestions, Sue.
I'm inspired by being in these discussions, so that helps with ideas.
Gloria?
Not taxes for the rich.
Gloria?
For me, I am encouraged and concerned all at the same time. Encouraged to be in this discussion and hear the experiences of this group and how people have pivoted and the changes that have been made. And that's really inspiring. And I mean, I love what David said, that it's caused us to rethink how we do things. And that certainly applies to us here as well. And where I'm concerned is that people will feel like, okay, we learned a lot, you know, we're good. And I really go to Sue's point of how do we keep the momentum going? Because this has been a huge shift, but it can't just wane off. It's gotta, how do we keep helping it just continue to accelerate the change?
Good point, good point. Bonnie, did you want to add anything? And before we go, we really want to thank you for being our production master.
Sure, sure. I find it encouraging and very hopeful, for sure. And I think that we're learning more and more each day as this process goes. And just everybody on this in this roundtable has been really inspiring, and just the comments that they've made. So I'm grateful to be able to be a part of it today.
Yeah. Have I hit everybody?
Frank? I don't think you heard.
Got Frank.
He was muted.
I did get Frank. Okay. Did I get you, Frank?
Absolutely.
I thought I did, because I was learning a bunch from you. And thank you for staying up and being willing to be with us at nighttime, your time.
But it's still light outside, so
Okay.
I'm fine here. No, this is a wonderful time. And also for the next round table. And I learned so much. I just put in the chat, there's a Dutch guy who was very famous at Davos, where all the economic people and the rich people come together somehow. Not many changes come from there, the economic forum. And he got a lot of time on television because he asked the rich to pay more taxes. Then he had an enormous confrontation with Fox. And he blew the guy from Fox away. I love that. But he wrote a book about being very positive about humankind. And it just came out in the United States. And I can really recommend that book from Rutger Bregman for those of you who love that kind of stuff. And I do want the riches to pay more taxes. So we all have a basic income, a basic living. So you have time to learn and change your jobs. I love that part from Franny.
Here, here.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. I'm going to let Mark close it out. I'm just going to first say thank you to Bonnie and Gloria, who really sort of put this together. I really want to thank Mark because he is a guru who we can turn to to look at how do we create that B state and how do we do it and keep it and maintain it and sustain it. I want to thank Sue for a recommendation on what we do next, and really look at that retrenchment and how do we deal with that. And I want to thank all of you who cared enough to join us to talk about this and to keep talking about this. We really appreciate it. And Mark, I'm going to let you close since you're my guru.
Well, thank you, Sue, and thanks for really initiating this whole conversation and inviting me as part of it, because to me this was awesome. You know, the part I love the most is this was expansive for me. I learned so much from all of your inputs and experiences that I have new eyes and new perspectives looking into this. I do think that we have to stay observant, because we're seeing the situation now in the height of the crisis of it, the height of the change of it.
Mm-hmm.
And as it gets sustained over time, how does that both evolve, but also how do people change with that? Like when it becomes normal, what's the impact on individuals long term? And I think the real important thing, and I'm so glad that both Sues have brought this forward, is I think the most important thing is to stay in conversation, not to get isolated in our own perspective of even if I have multiple clients, they're different than your clients, and it's different than Europe's experience and Brazil's experience or Latin America. It's like we need to expand the scope of the conversation, but I think that it's important just to have the conversation so that we keep learning from each other and observe it as we go forward, so that we can be the change agents and leaders to support people in bringing more humanity to the workplace in a way that evolves the workplace. And I do have concern around the economic side. Like we haven't hit the economic dilemma yet because there's been some recovery, if you will, or some support. How's that going to change things? And boy, I'd love to have more conversations like this, because I personally am not fully prepared for all of that.
Yeah.
So, no, thank you.
Point. Thank you. I personally commit to, I'm going to take some of these ideas and certainly post them on LinkedIn as a follow-up to the conversation. And we'll definitely, we've got everybody's that signed in and registered. We'll definitely be back in touch with a second opportunity to talk about what happens when the funding runs out.
Yes.
What do we do then?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, very, very much for coming. So appreciate it, and hope to see you again.
Thanks.
Many blessings.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.